Let me tell you about Shurat HaDin. We live in the Middle East, a place where the fires are burning, a region of the world where the Arab nations are in constant revolt against their governments and against each other. This lack of stability, this violence, are increasing and increasing, and the only thing that unifies these nations is their hatred towards the Jewish state. We live in Israel, a place where the rocket qassams, the drive-by shooting, the ambushes are continuing and continuing, and there is no end in sight. The Palestinian organization think that they finally found the key that will destroy the Jewish state and will drive us from our land. The governments of Iran, Syria, Saudi Arabia are pouring millions and millions of dollars into the hands of the Palestinian organizations in order to keep the pot boiling and to make sure that more and more Jewish life will be lost. In the past 12 years, our organization, Shurat HaDin-Israel Law Center, is fighting the fight against terror organizations and their financial patrons in court. We started in the beginning of the Intifada, where every day brought a suicide bomber to our malls, to our buses, and we saw that the IDF and the Israeli government are left with no answer, and we decided that we, as private people, must take a role in the war against terrorism. We decided to use our own weapon, the legal field. We filed cases against Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Fatah Tanzim, PLO, Palestinian Authority, against Iran, Syria, North Korea, Egypt, against banks like Arab Bank, National Westminster, Credit Lyonnais, UBS, Bank of China, fighting terrorism in court. And I will tell you, in brief, how we really do it. The biggest bank of the Arab world, called the Arab Bank. Not a very creative name, but that's its name. It's based in Jordan, it has branches all over the world, and it's got over $30 billion in assets. It's like the Citibank of the Arab world. During the Intifada, the Arab Bank ran a reward program in favor of the families of the suicide bombers, which went like that. If you were a father or a mother of a suicide bomber, if you were a child of a suicide bomber, you could have gone to the Hamas headquarters in Gaza, get a letter from them proving that you are a relative of a suicide bomber, take the letter to the branch of the Arab Bank in Gaza, show it to the bank manager, and the bank manager will give you a reward of many thousands of dollars. Ads were published all over the Arab world. If you want to support your brothers in the Palestinian Authority, if you want to help the Shaheed, the martyrs, donate money to this specific bank account in Gaza. People in Saudi Arabia know that if they donate money to this specific bank account in Gaza, they can go back home, sit in their living rooms, watch Al Jazeera TV showing the ambulances taking away the bodies of the dead and the injured in Jerusalem. The Arab Bank would have continued with this reward program until today, unless they made a little mistake. They ran this program while having a branch in New York. We saw that and realized that there is an American jurisdiction over the bank. Along with American attorneys, we filed a lawsuit against the Arab Bank on behalf of 50 families of terror victims that were killed or injured by Hamas, seeking over $5 billion compensations. The first thing that Arab Bank did was trying to close its branch in New York. The Congress didn't let them to do so. After a long negotiation, they had to freeze $450 million of their money in the United States, and then they didn't have a choice but to litigate the case. They hired a very big law firm to represent them in court. They filed motion to dismiss the case, but all their motions were denied, and we just finished the discovery stage, where the court ordered them to turn over into our hands all the documentations of the transaction that they did from the beginning of the Intifada. And there is a paper trail that proves that the Arab Bank gave money to the families of the suicide bombers knowingly and intentionally. The Arab Bank will have to compromise, or we'll take it to trial, and it's going to be a jury trial. We'll take the case against the Arab Bank until the end because we can win the case. We'll take it until the end because of the terror victims that we're representing, who deserve justice. And let me tell you about one of them, Hannah Nachumberg and her family. Hannah Nachumberg is a young woman from New York who lives in Israel that in August 2001 decided to take her family to eat pizza in the Sbarro pizza place in Jerusalem. Shortly after she entered the restaurant, a suicide bomber from the Hamas, wearing explosive vest, entered the restaurant and blew himself up. Everybody remember the suicide bombing. Everyone remember the famous sign of a Sbarro pizza place, lies down on the floor and around it all the dead and the injured. Everybody remember where it happened. It happened in the intersection between King George Street to Jaffa Street, the heart of the commercial district of Jerusalem. The cell that was responsible for this suicide bombing was the one who blew up the Moment Cafe a couple of months before, killing 18 young people, and the one that will blow up the Hebrew University cafeteria a while later, ending up with the death of 9 young students. Hannah Nachumberg did not get killed in the attack. A metal pin entered her head and lined in her brain. She went into irreversible coma. She was hospitalized in the Gaza Hospital in Jerusalem, and after many months, when the doctors saw that there was no improvement in her situation, she was moved to a medical center in Israel. She's staying there until this day. Every day, her parents come to the hospital, sit near her bed, and pray. I've seen photos of Hannah's daughter, 5-year-old Sarah, dressed up in Purim costume, coming to show her mother how she dressed up in Purim that day. I've seen photos of Hannah's brother, dressed up in his tuxedo wedding suit, coming to show his sister how he will dress up in his wedding day. Every single day, her parents come to the hospital, enter her room, sit near her bed, and pray. On behalf of Hannah Nachumberg and the rest of the families of the terror victims, we'll take the case against the Arab Bank until the end. The case is not over yet, but the bank already changed the way they were doing businesses. Not only the Arab Bank. This lawsuit sent a shockwave through the international banking system that no bank agrees anymore to provide financial services to terror organizations. No bank agrees to provide financial services to a designated charity that raises funds for a terror organization. No bank agrees to provide financial services to terror zones like Gaza. There is no banking system in Gaza. This is why you see them smuggling money into Gaza with suitcases through the tunnels. And that hurts them very much because they need the money. They need to bring hundreds of millions of dollars into the Gaza Strip. Not for the gun or for the explosive vest or even for the missile. They need it to support the population. They need it to provide free food, free medical services, free social services to the population in order to gain back their loyalty, in order to continue to fire missiles from their backyards into Israel. They need to maintain an army. They do have a military. They don't wear a uniform, but they have soldiers. Who are they? Obeying the Hamas and waiting for the day that they will be called to carry an attack in Israel. But until this day, they are on salary month after month after month. For all that, they need hundreds of millions of dollars. I regularly meet with the intelligence agents in Israel, and they all tell me the same thing. If you cut the funding, you can cut the terrorism. If you stop the flow of the money, you stop the flow of the terrorism, because the terror organizations need the fund, they need the money, they need the facilities. They cannot do without it. We sued UBS, we sued American Express Bank, we sued Lebanese Canadian Bank, we sued National Westminster, Credit Lyonnais, and they all lined up with the new instructions of looking over where your money is going. However, there was one bank that refused to strengthen its behavior. One bank that despite all the warnings, continued to tunnel money to a terror organization. One bank that said, I don't really care. A very big bank. It's the Bank of China. The Bank of China had a bank account for a Hamas activist named Shurat, who was sitting in Beijing, and were receiving money from the headquarters in Hamas in Syria, hundreds of thousands of dollars each time. Once the money was hitting his account in Beijing, he was pulling the money out and sending it to his brother, another Hamas activist in Gaza. The counterterrorism division of the Israeli government met with the Central Bank of China, met with officials of the Treasury in China, and urged them to close down the account. But the Chinese said that Hamas is not a terror organization in Gaza. So we took them to court. We gathered 86 terror victims from Sderot who got killed or injured by the rocket Qassams from the Gaza Strip, and filed a lawsuit against the Bank of China in New York. This lawsuit drove the Chinese crazy. It was right before the Olympic Games. They sent us warning letters telling us to stop talking about the lawsuit, warning us that by connecting their name to terror financing, we are destroying their reputation, we are ruining their name. They said that they will file a libel suit against us in China and will criminally persecute us in China. This is why none of us is going to China any day soon. But we will not stop talking about the lawsuit and will not stop fighting about the lawsuit. Citibank has a slogan. We're trying to make banking easier. We have a slogan. We're trying to make banking much harder to the terrorists. We will fight the Bank of China because our clients, the terror victims, kept fighting. Leah Boucassis was only 17 years old when she was walking one Shabbat with her brother, 15 years old, down the street in Sderot, where the red alert went off. This is the alarm that goes on when the missiles are falling from Gaza. In this instance, you have 7 seconds to find a shelter. She was walking down the street, and there was no bus stop and no building to hide behind. So the first thing that went into her head is to protect her brother. She fell over him and covered him. The missile fell right near their heads. Many shrapnels went into their both heads. She fought for 7 days of her life in the hospital. She died. Her brother is disabled for life. We will not let them kill our children and keep silent. We will fight back. Another sort of cases we're doing is cases against states. Every time Hamas carries out a terror attack, we can file a lawsuit against Iran and against Syria in the Federal District Court of Washington. Iran does not defend themselves. Syria defends themselves. Syria hires a lawyer, an ex-Attorney General of the United States named Ramsey Clark. But when it comes to actually participate in the case, after they win their motion to dismiss the case based on the argument that they have sovereign immunity because they are a sovereign state, they default the case and we continue against them. We just recently won a judgment against them for $378 million, the first of its kind. Iran does not show up at court at all. We immediately get a default judgment against them and we try to collect it against assets that belong to the Iranian government. In the beginning, we tried to collect it in the United States. We found frozen accounts that belong to the Iranian government. We asked to collect the account towards our judgment. The State Department opposed us. We needed to hire a lobbyist. We hired Stuart Eisenstadt, a former Undersecretary of State, that will help us to pass a law in the Congress which overcame the objection of the State Department. Law that say that the right of the terror victims to collect their judgment overrules any other regulation or law. And we were able to collect several $1 million towards a family that the father got killed in a bus bombing in Jerusalem. We also found a house that belonged to the son of the Shah. Years ago, when the son of the Shah wanted to learn how to fly a plane, an airplane, his father sent him to Lubbock, Texas, where they have a very big Air Force base, and bought him a house. After the Islamic Revolution, the Iranian government confiscated the house. It became an Iranian property. We heard about it, and we asked the sheriff to go and to force a sale on the house. The sheriff went, took our judgment, forced a sale on the house, and they gave us $500,000 towards the house. When it comes to assets around the states, around the world, Iran acts differently. One day we hear that the National Oil Company of Iran has a bank account in Rome which has $500 million in it. We immediately take our American judgments against Iran, go to Italy, and domesticate our judgments. Along with the motion of domestication, we asked the court to put a lien on the money. And the court did. The court issued a temporary restraining order against the bank and called the parties to a hearing in front of him in 10 days. This time, Iran not only sent lawyers to court, they got the Vatican involved, they sent a representative to court, they got the foreign ministry of the Italian government involved, they sent a representative to court. All the banks that had relations with Iran sent lawyers to court. The National Oil Company sent lawyers to court. They were standing there, 20 lawyers, and screaming at the judge in Italian. They had two arguments. One, you cannot collect your judgment against the Iranian government against the assets of the National Oil Company. They are not the same entities, they don't share the same assets. The other argument was even more creative. They say that they didn't get an adequate notice about the lawsuit. 20 lawyers were standing there in court, and yet they claim that they didn't get an adequate notice about the lawsuit. We hired an international law expert that came to court and testified in regimes like Iran. There is no difference between the government to the national company, and you indeed can collect your judgment against the Iranian government, against the assets of the National Oil Company. We also claimed that the service that we did to Iran was sufficient. But the court, who wanted to go on the safe side, ordered us to re-serve Iran, and in the meantime, he took off the lien. 1 hour after he took off the lien, Iran shipped the money away from Rome to Thailand. Although we didn't get the money, we were told that as a result of this lawsuit, Iran never went back to the Italian bank and put its money in Italy. And we asked to do the same thing in other countries in Europe. And we did. We went to France. We domesticated our judgment. And Iran pulled its money away from the French banks. We went to Germany and filed a motion for domestication, and Iran immediately pulled its money from the German banks. A couple of years ago, we started hearing in the news that Iran is pulling its money away from the European banks and sending it to Asia or taking it back home. And there is not much Iran can do with the money back home. They need the hard currency. They need the dollar, they need the euro. They need to issue letters of credit. They need to trade with Western European countries before the sanctions. And most importantly, they need to fund the Palestinian organization in Gaza, which use only 3 currencies, the shekel, the dollar, and the euro. By obstructing Iran from using the hard currency, we're obstructing them from funding terrorism. We heard a lot about the North Korea's involvement in the Middle East. But I can tell you that it started back then, in 1972, in a horrifying terror attack that happened in the airport in Israel, back then called Lod Airport, today called Ben Gurion Airport. It was done by 3 members of the terror cell called the Japanese Red Army. with the collaboration of the PFLP, a wing of the PLO called the Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine, headed by George Habash. The Japanese Red Army was asked by George Habash to hijack an Israeli plane exactly like they did a month before to a Japanese plane. And the terror organization agreed. They came to Lebanon, they trained, but after learning the security regulation in El Al, they realized that it would be too difficult to hijack an Israeli plane. So they went to an alternative plane, which is carrying out an attack inside the airport itself. In those days, you could have brought anything you wanted in your luggage. Nobody checked your bags, nobody scrutinized your bags. So these three members took a flight from Rome to Tel Aviv, Air France flight. And when they arrived to the airport in Tel Aviv, they were waiting for their bags to arrive. They were standing there with all the passengers. And when their bags arrived on the carousel, they opened their bags and they pulled out hand grenades and guns and started shooting towards all the people in the crowd. They killed 28 people. 17 of them were Puerto Rican pilgrims that came to visit Israel. Christians that stayed their entire life to come and visit the Holy Land. We represent these families of the Puerto Rican terror victims in a lawsuit against the country that supported the Japanese Red Army, the country that gave them material support, money, training, the country that sent them to Lebanon and provided them with agents to train them, the country that gave them a shelter after the attack to leave North Korea. We filed a lawsuit against North Korea in the federal court in San Juan, and last June we got a judgment against them for $323 million. We know that North Korea has frozen bank accounts in the United States and other assets, and right now we are in litigation against the banks that are holding these accounts. After the Islamic Revolution in Iran, a lot of people tried to escape from Iran. Many Jews tried to cross the border from Iran to Afghanistan, walk all the way to Turkey, and in Turkey take a plane to Israel, Europe, or United States. In 1994 and 1997, 12 Iranian Jews that tried to cross the border from Iran to Afghanistan disappeared somewhere along the border. Nobody knew what's happened to them. Their families went to the Iranian government to seek for information, but the Iranian government refused to give them any information. Their families held their own investigation. They went to every police station in Iran. They went to every hospital in Iran. They visited every jail in Iran, asking if anybody knows what's happened to their children, to their husbands, to their fathers, but nobody gave them any information. In the end, the families gave up. They left Iran. Some of them moved to Israel. One family moved to LA. In 2002, a neighbor of the family that moved to LA came to them and told them the following story. He told them that while living in Iran, he was dealing with the major prison in Iran, called Evin Prison in Tehran, trying to sell them a land. In the course of the business deal, he was invited to the jail to take a tour to learn what the needs of the prison are. We came to the jail, he took the tour, he was accompanied by one of the guards who took him along, and towards the end of the tour, he went downstairs, both of them, 10 floors below ground. When they reached the 10th floor, he suddenly saw a very dark cell. He approached the gate, and he recognized the son of his neighbors that disappeared some years before. The boy was very excited. He thought that finally somebody came to rescue him. He approached the gate, but the neighbor was very afraid, didn't say a word, and took a step back. In the end of the tour, they went upstairs, 10 floors up, and the neighbor who couldn't hold himself very carefully asked the guard who were the prisoners that he saw in the dark cell. And the guard told him that they were Jewish prisoners who tried to escape from Iran. So now we know that these 12 missing Iranian Jews are sitting in a jail in Iran, have been tortured, and he wanted to raise public awareness for the case. We wanted to file a lawsuit against an Iranian official, but there was one condition we had to fill. We could have sued him only if we catch him in the United States and we serve him with a lawsuit. So one day we hear that the former president of Iran, Mohammad Khatami, is coming to the United States to be a speaker in the UN. Somehow we got a hold of his itinerary and we saw that the next day he's going to be a speaker in a dinner that was held for him by CARE, Council of American Islamic Relations. We learned that for $400 you can buy a ticket for the dinner, and for additional $400 you can buy a photo opportunity with Khatami. So we hired a processor from Virginia, an ex-policeman, and we gave him the lawsuit plus $800. $400 for the ticket, $400 for the photo opportunity. He came to the dinner along with his wife. His turn to take the photo with Khatami arrived. He stood near Khatami, handed him the papers, told him that the families of 12 missing Iranian Jews are suing him in court. Khatami took the papers, and the photographer took the photo. The professor and his wife did not stay for dinner. Khatami had 20 days to answer the lawsuit. He failed, and now we're waiting for the Virginian court to come with a decision. When we'll get a judgment for the Virginian court, we know that Khatami has assets in France and Germany. We will try to collect the judgment against them, but this wasn't the reason why we filed the lawsuit. We filed this lawsuit to warn Iranian officials that once they leave Tehran, there will be private lawyers, there will be courts, there will be private people that will try to bring them to justice for their crimes against humanity. A lot of people ask, what can you do with the judgment against Hamas? So one day we hear that the Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority in Gaza, Ismail Haniyeh, who's the head of Hamas, goes to Iran and raises $40 million. He couldn't use the banking system, so he put them all in suitcases, loaded them on a truck, and drove the truck in Egypt, arrived to the border between Egypt to Gaza, wanted to cross the border. But he was stopped by the Israeli forces who controlled the border at the time and told him that he cannot cross the border to Gaza with the money. That if he wants to cross the border to Gaza, he has to leave the suitcases behind. Ismail Haniyeh, who worked very hard for the money, didn't want to leave the money behind, and he told them that he was a prime minister, he has diplomatic immunity, and so do the suitcases. Israel did not buy that, and for many, many hours there was a crisis in the border. Ismail Haniyeh wants to go through, and Israel does not let him. In the end, the one that came to save Ismail Haniyeh was the Arab League. The Arab League is one of the most anti-Semitic organizations in the world. In 1945, the Arab League decided to boycott Jewish businesses and corporations. In 1945, before the Israeli state was created, the Arab League already decided to boycott Jewish business and corporations. In 1972, they took it one step further and imposed an oil embargo against Israel. And during the Intifada, every time there was a conflict, they constantly took the side of the Palestinian Authority and ran a lot of decisions against Israel, condemning them in the UN. The Arab League came to Ismail Haniyeh and told him they have a solution. They will open a bank account in Cairo. He will deposit the money in the bank account, cross the border to Gaza, and they will find a way the next day, 2 days later, to transfer him the money. And that's what happened. The Arab League opened the bank account. Ismail Haniyeh, after taking some millions of dollars into his own pocket, deposited the rest of the money in the bank account, crossed the border to Gaza, and we got a phone call. We were asked if there's anything we can do to stop the money from falling to the hands of Ismail Haniyeh. We have a judgment against Hamas that we won in the American court. We went to Washington, where the Arab League has an office, and filed a motion for a turnover proceeding. We say that the money in the bank account of the Arab League belongs to Hamas. So we have the judgment against Hamas, turn the money over to us. The Arab League did not ignore this proceeding. They hired a lawyer. They came to court. They claimed that the money does not belong to Hamas yet, that it still belongs to the countries who donated it. And the proof was that the money did not cross the border to Gaza. We have a former Mossad agent that filed an affidavit in court stating exactly what's happened, how the Arab League opened a bank account in Cairo, how Ismail Haniyeh himself deposited the money in the bank account, and why the money belongs to Hamas. And we were able to win their motion to dismiss. And now the case is going to trial. And once again, it's a jury trial. We believe we can win the case. We believe that in the end of the day, we'll make the Arab League pay $40 million to terror victims. That will be the first time that the Arab League is paying money to Jewish people. That will be the first time that the Arab League is paying for its anti-Semitic policy throughout the years. When the terror organizations and Israel's enemies realized that they cannot win Israel militarily, that everything they do and all the blood that they spill does not surround Israel, they decided that instead of warfare, they will start using lawfare. And what they do is going from a court around the world, any court that declares that they have extraterritorial jurisdiction, and file complaints against the IDF soldiers for war crimes. There was a major terrorist in Gaza in the beginning of the Intifada named Saleh Shehadeh. Saleh Shehadeh was called by the Israelis the engineer because he created all the bombs and all the explosives and sent the suicide bombers to kill hundreds of Jews in the cities in Israel. He was responsible for hundreds of Jews, and Israel tried to assassinate him, but they didn't succeed. Every time they tried, they simply didn't succeed. They were able to take down number one, Sheikh Yassin, but they weren't able to take down number two. They tried. One day they got information that he's driving a car in the streets of Gaza, and they fired a missile towards the car, but they were very afraid, so they didn't hit so hard, and the missile hit only the back part of the car. Ismail Haniyeh got slightly injured, fled the car, ran away, and Israel missed him. So the next time Israel has information where he's hiding, they decide not to miss him this time. They get information that Saleh Shehadeh is sitting in a building in Gaza, 15 floors up, and Israel decided to drop a bomb on the building, a very, very heavy bomb, which weighed a ton. They came and they warned all the population, all the civilians that's living in the building, to leave the building. None of them did. So Israel just dropped the bomb. The entire building crashed. Saleh Shehadeh got killed, along with other 13 Palestinians. The families of these 13 Palestinians are going from a court to a court around the world and filing war crime complaints against the IDF soldiers and the IDF commanders that participating in the Saleh Shhade bombing. They went to England, they failed. They went to South Africa, they failed. Their last attempt was in Spain, and they succeeded. The court in Spain investigated the affair and decided there is a basis for a war crime and issued an arrest warrant against the IDF soldiers. Now, we should know that this arrest warrant is very dangerous because it's not only of being prevents from the soldiers to arrive to Spain, but it somehow can become internationally, and they can be stopped anywhere if they leave Israel. The Israeli government tried to approach the Spanish government to cancel the warrants, but the Spanish government told them that they have no way to get involved in the court order. There is a separation between the government and the court system. So we were asked if we can do something. And we thought that if we find a Spanish figure that was involved with war crimes, and we bring a war complaint against them in the Spanish court, maybe the Spanish court will find it not so much exciting to go after the IDF soldiers. So we looked and we found out that the former Prime Minister of Spain, Javier Solana, was the head of the NATO forces in the Kosovo War. And during the Kosovo War, the NATO forces dropped bombs from high altitude. One of them fell on a children's hospital and killed 7 children. That's a war crime, killing innocent civilians. We immediately hired the lawyer in Spain, asked him to draft a complaint against Javier Solana. We told him not to bother so much, to take the complaint against the IDF soldiers, change the name, change the facts, and similarly copy it. We got in touch with victims in Kosovo that agreed to serve as plaintiffs in the complaint, and we were working very, very quickly, very fast on the complaint until the lawyer called us up and told us to hold on for a while because he heard that Spain is going to change the law. 2 weeks later, he called us up and said that Spain changed the law, that from now on you cannot file a lawsuit for war crimes against any individual, only against a Spanish citizen, or if the defendant has Spanish citizenship. And although the law was not retroactive, it was ruling from now on, the Spanish court canceled the war crime complaint against the IDF soldiers. And let me tell you lastly about the flotilla. What was our role in sinking the Gaza flotilla? We all remember that in May 2010, a lot of anarchists and pro-Palestinian people decided that they are going to breach the sea blockade that Israel had over Gaza. They didn't want to do it from humanitarian reasons, they just wanted to have a clash between them, civilians, to the IDF soldiers in sea. They wanted the media to cover such a fight, once again, between soldiers to unarmed people. So they rented a very big boat called the Mavi Marmara, gathered 500 people, and sailed from Turkey towards Israel. Before they arrived at the territorial water of Israel, Israel already sent boats and asked them nicely to come with them to the port in Ashdod. But the Mavi Marmara's people did not agree, and Israel decided that they will stop them by road, by helicopter, sending Navy SEALs to the boat. They sent them one after one with ropes. And we know that once the soldiers arrived to the boat, they were almost lynched by the people on the boat, to the extent that the other soldiers that were coming down, each and every one of them saw what's going on and what they're doing to their friends, and there was no way they could climb back up. In the end, there was a fight on the boat. 9 people got killed, and a lot of the IDF soldiers got severely injured. That was a disaster to the state of Israel. In terms of PR, in terms of international law, there was a UN committee established after that, and Israel suffers from the results of the flotilla until this day. It was a big success, though, to the organizers who wanted to repeat this big success the year later, in May 2011. But this time they decided not to take only the Mavi Marmara with 1 boat, but take 15 boats, and not only 500 of them, but 1,500 anarchists, pro-Palestinians. They gathered parliament, European Parliament members, they got celebrities, they got actors, authors, they got the sister of Tony Blair's, sister-in-law of Tony Blair, and they got a lot of celebrities, and they all gathered in Greece to sail towards Israel. And we thought that if we can do something to stop them before they sail towards Israel, we should do anything we can. And we're thinking, what can we go after? What can we do? What all the boats need in order to sail that we can prevent it? And we got to the conclusion that all the boats need maritime insurance. No boat can sail without maritime insurance, and no port will let any boat to leave without a maritime insurance. So we sent warning letters to all the maritime insurance companies in the world. There are not so many of them, only 30. And we told them that if they provide insurance to the boats, they're adding and abetting a terror organization. Because the end goal of the boats is Gaza, is to support Hamas. And this is not allowed according to American law. And they may carry criminal liability and civil liability, which will be lawsuits on behalf of terror victims filed against them for hundreds of millions of dollars. The first company to answer us was Lloyd's of London, the biggest one, who told us that indeed Hamas is a designated terror organization in Israel, Europe, and the United States, and they have no intention to provide any of the boats with insurance. And they asked us to give them the Maritime International number that they can go and find out if these boats are insured by them and cancel their insurance. We got contact with the Intelligence Navy in Israel, and we got the international maritime numbers of some of the boats. And a couple of days later, we heard that 6 of the boats canceled their participation in the flotilla because they couldn't get insurance. Then we thought, what else the boats need in order to sail? And we found out that they all need GPS, communication services, media coverage, and it's all controlled by what we call satellite communication services. We also found out that in the Middle East, there is one company that provides these communication services. It's called Inmarsat. They sit in Dubai, but they have offices in Miami as well. So we sent a warning letter to Inmarsat telling them not to provide with the flotilla boats with any communication services. Inmarsat did not answer us, so we filed an injunction against them in the Miami court. And 2 days later, we read in the New York Times that the biggest boat, the Mavi Marmara, is pulling out of the race because lack of insurance and some communication problems. Then we got in touch with Governor Rick Perry before he ran to presidency. He heard me speaking in Israel a year before, and he told us that if anything he can do to help us, we will not hesitate to contact him. He came and said that he wants to do something about the flotilla. What can he do? And we asked him if he can send a letter to the Attorney General of the United States, to Eric Holder, asking him why he's not prosecuting the people that are raising funds from the flotilla in the United States. Because raising funds for the flotilla is a violation of the American law. We found a very, very old law called the Neutrality Act. It was legislated in 1789, and it's an anti-piracy law, which basically says that any American citizen cannot take part in a hostile act against a friendly state of the United States, and in particular say that they cannot take part in naval expedition against a friendly state of the United States. So, and obviously participating in the flotilla is naval expedition against a friendly state of the United States. He sent a letter, and it was covered by all the media, who emphasized that whoever participates in this flotilla may be criminally indicted because it's breaching the Neutrality Act. And then lastly, we hired a law firm in Greece. We asked them to approach the port authorities in Greece and demand that the port authority will go on each and every boat that is still there and make sure that they have insurance, that they have satellite communication services, that they are fit to sail, and mainly to check if they filled up their form, the voyage form, correctly. We found out that according to the Greek law, every boat that wants to sail from Greece must fill in a voyage form, like a travel form. And in this form, they must put the port that they are leaving and the port that they are going to. And there was no way they could have put in their destination Gaza, because Gaza doesn't have a port, and there is a sea blockade around Gaza. So the port authorities went on their boat and found out that all these boats filled in their form Alexandria. They did not let them sail. This afternoon, the organizers of the flotilla organized a press conference, and they say that because of this lawfare group, Shurat HaDin from Tel Aviv, who spreads lies about them, they don't have a choice but to cancel the flotilla. This is only a portion of the cases we are handling in Israel, in the United States, Europe, and Canada. Every day we get calls from more and more terror victims who want to fight back, who are seeking justice, who more than anything else in the world don't want to be victims anymore. And we are dedicated to help them. We established Shurat HaDin-Israel Law Center to take all these hundreds of cases and find them in orderly manner in the courts around the world. We will fight terrorism in court because we don't have any other choice. We do it because we can win the cases. We do it because we are winning the cases. Just 2 years ago, we got a great victory in the Supreme Court of the United States in the case that was filed against the Palestinian Authority on behalf of 2 young orphans. Their parents were driving a car in an area near Bet Shemesh. They left the oldest baby with their parents who were babysitting him, and they took the youngest baby with them in the car. They were driving their car until they reached a stoplight, and they had to stop the car. The moment they stopped their car, a Hamas gang that ambushed them shot them to death. The baby was sitting in his baby seat, was sitting lower than the line of the fire, and didn't get hurt. It took the IDF 3 hours to find the car, the dead parents, and the crying baby. We find a lawsuit in the United States against the Palestinian Authority who allowed Hamas to carry out attacks against Israelis in those years. And the Palestinian Authority hired Ramsey Clark, who came to court and raised several objections. First, he said the Palestinian Authority is a state, and since we are a state, we have sovereign immunity, we cannot be sued in court. Second, he said the United